You don't forget your first winter without a roof. It doesn't announce itself, it just arrives, seeps in under your skin like doubt, until one morning your breath fogs before you speak, and your fingers ache before you wake. The world hardens when the frost comes, and if you've got no door to shut, you learn quickly that surviving isn't about bravery, it's about cleverness. The kind born from desperation, not design. People think you freeze all at once. You don't. You freeze in pieces. Before we begin, take a moment to subscribe, but only if you enjoy what I do here. Get comfortable and comment, where are you listening from tonight, and what time it is for you. Now, dim those lights. Lay cozy under your blanket, because tonight, we're going somewhere cold, somewhere what it seems impossible to survive, but they did, and here's how. Toma, who hadn't owned a pair of boots in 3 years, once said the trick was to never sleep all the way, said full sleep was for people with fire and doors. He'd nod off in cycles, 10 minutes down, 5 minutes up, shuffling in place to keep his blood remembering it had places to go. He'd sit under the blacksmith's eaves, where the forge's warmth still clung to the stone, and hum tunelessly. No one chased him off. Not because they were kind, because it was easier to ignore a man who looked like he might die if you made eye contact. You learned to sleep with rocks, not big ones, just palm-sized, heated at the edge of a fire someone else built, usually someone drunk enough not to notice. You'd wrap them in cloth and tuck them under your arms, between your thighs, anywhere the blood slowed. Sometimes they'd burn you, but burns meant you could feel. You learned to prefer a scar to numbness. Pain meant you still had a say in the matter. The baker's boy, Joran, once left a stale roll under a bench, still warm, no note, no look, just bread, quiet as kindness. You broke it open, found the center still soft, and wept like it was a miracle. Which in winter it was. Food didn't just fill your belly, it warmed you from the inside out. Oats, beans, bread crusts. The fire was important, but a hot meal was fire you could carry. You learned to eat slowly, let each bite linger, like it owed you something. You started to think in temperature, not in numbers but in textures. The way the air felt against your teeth when you talked. The sound boots made when they broke ice instead of mud. The weight of your own breath hanging in front of you, as if it were trying to flee before you could take another step. Cold wasn't one thing. It was 1,000 little negotiations. The trick was to stay just above shivering. Shivering meant your body still cared enough to fight. When it stopped, that's when you worried. There was an old widow named Edda, who kept her goat in a lean-to behind the apothecary. No one asked why. No one told her not to. You found the goat first, then the warm straw, then the spot beneath the eaves where the snow didn't quite reach. Edda didn't speak when she saw you there the first time, huddled beside the animal, your knees tucked into your chest like they were trying to whisper something to your lungs. She just dropped an extra handful of hay and walked away. The goat farted, and you laughed. It was the warmest moment of your week. You learned to share heat like a secret, back to back, with other drifters. Not friends, not allies, just bodies trying to stay less dead. No one talked during those nights, talking wasted breath. Instead, you breathed in rhythm like wolves in a den, and hoped no one rolled away in their sleep. When you woke, you never asked names. You just nodded. That was enough. A name could make a person real, and real people had a way of vanishing in the snow. There was one man. Everyone called him Fint. But you knew that wasn't his name. Too short, too sharp. He had layers like a cabbage and a beard like an apology. He said snow wasn't the real killer. It was the wind. Snow just lies there, he muttered once. It's the wind. Built windbreaks out of trash and broken stools, wedging himself between alley walls to trick the weather into missing him. You copied him. Everyone did. Fint wasn't kind, but he was right. That made him more valuable than any priest you'd ever met. You found warmth in the strangest places. Dung piles, for one. Still steaming, still stinking, but alive. You'd lie beside them if you had to. Face turned just enough to pretend the smell was someone else's problem. Dead animals too. Sad as it was, you'd curl around a carcass and pretend it was still breathing. Not because it was noble, because it was warm. Survival doesn't ask for dignity. It just asks if you're still breathing. The millhouse had an exhaust chute, barely wider than a child, but just enough for heat to slip out when the grindstones ran. You and 3 others would crouch there when the sun dropped, hunched like beggars, steaming like bread. The miller knew. He must have. But he never said a word. Maybe he remembered a winter like this one. Maybe he just didn't want to carry 4 frozen bodies out in the morning. Either way, the chute became a temple. You even gave it a name, the Mouth of Mercy. Sometimes the weather broke people. You'd see it in their posture, the way they stopped pulling their cloak tighter, like they'd made peace with the cold, like they were letting it in, like a guest that wouldn't stop knocking. That's when you kept watch the closest, not out of charity, out of strategy. A body that stopped trying was a body that would be dead by dawn. And if they had dry socks or thicker cloth, or a better spot by the fire, you took it, quietly, apologetically, but you took it. Survival doesn't care if you say sorry. Some nights, you sang, not for joy, for breath. Singing kept your lungs moving, kept your teeth from grinding. You hummed lullabies, tavern chants, anything with a beat. Once you sang a verse your mother used to hum while stirring porridge. You hadn't thought of her in years. The song kept you warm for 6 full minutes, maybe more. Memory's got a temperature all its own when it wants to. You wrapped your feet in everything. Rags, hay, pages torn from prayer books. Didn't matter if the words were sacred. If they kept your toes from turning black, they were worth more than scripture. You lined your boots with lies and psalms and bits of romantic verse. One time you pulled a line from a saint's sermon out of your boot and laughed until your ribs ached. It said, "The meek shall inherit the earth." Not tonight, you thought. Tonight the meek just want a place to sleep. The chimney sweep's boy used to crawl into the soot hatches and sleep there, curled like a cat. He said the soot kept in the warmth, said he dreamed in black. One night you joined him. Soot in your mouth, grit in your eyes, but you slept through the wind for once. That was the best you'd felt in weeks. You started looking for places that had been used. Heat lingers where others have survived. That's the closest thing to shelter most of you ever found. And when the snow finally stopped, when the air didn't bite quite so deep, you didn't celebrate. You just breathed slower, walked farther, counted fingers and toes, and thanked whatever cruel sky let you keep most of them. There were more frozen bodies that year than there were prayers said for them, but you weren't one of them, not yet. And in a world like this, not yet is the warmest thing you can say. You learned to sleep like a fox, half awake, ears twitching, ready to bolt if the sound of boots got too close. The guards didn't care if you froze, but they cared deeply if you were seen freezing near something important. A merchant's door, a church step, anywhere that made respectable people feel vaguely uncomfortable. So you curled where shadow met stone and practiced the art of not being noticed, which, in winter, was safer than being pitied. Pity came with attention, and attention meant being moved along. Or worse, locked up just long enough to miss the one warm night that might have saved you. You made friends, sort of. Not in the way that involved trust or secrets or shared dreams. You made alliances. Old Bran with the rope belt, Mira who knew how to charm a fire out of wet bark, the twins who weren't actually twins, but they shared a blanket and a past no one dared to ask about. You took turns watching the fire, not out of love, but because nobody survives alone for long. You didn't talk about tomorrow. You didn't make plans. You just kept each other alive for one more sleep. That was the unspoken deal. You figured out the rhythm of frost, how it settled first on the iron hinges, then the haystacks, then the breath of livestock. If you could see it forming, you could race it. Sometimes you won. Other nights it got there first and sat on your chest like a cat made of knives. You'd wake with your blanket stiff and your fingers purple at the edges, swearing at nothing in particular. You learned to sleep low, to bury your face in the crook of your arm where your breath could heat your nose. You woke up dizzy most mornings, but at least you woke up. There were rules. Rules you didn't write, but broke at your own risk. Never steal kindling from a lit fire. Never let your feet stay wet. Never sleep with your belt buckled. You might bloat in the cold. Never eat snow unless you had to. It steals more heat than it gives. And never ever light a fire too high. Flame attracts attention, and attention, as always, is just frost, in a different form. You followed the rules because someone else hadn't, and they hadn't woken up. You'd see things sometimes. Shapes in the mist, voices that sounded like people you'd forgotten, cold messes with your head, makes you imagine comforts that haven't existed in years. You'd swear someone called your name only to turn and find a cow staring at you like it knew something. You called that the frost whisper. Everyone had heard it once. Some leaned into it. Others went still and never came back. You didn't judge. You just wrapped your scarf tighter and hummed until the voices left you alone. One night you got lucky. A stable hand took pity, or maybe just had a soft spot for half-dead things, and let you into the straw loft, told you to keep to the edge, not spook the mare. You thanked him with a verse, a short one, about breath and warmth and the sound of a heart that wasn't your own. He didn't get it, just shrugged and left you to it. You slept deeper than you had in months, woke up with straw in your hair and tears on your cheek, not from sadness, from the kind of sleep that heals a little. You started collecting scraps. Not food, cloth, bits of wool, torn linen, anything that could be tied or tucked or stuffed between layers. One man stitched old socks into a kind of makeshift tunic, called it his second skin. You built yourself a hood out of potato sack and rabbit fur. Looked like madness. Worked like magic. Style was for the fed. Warmth was for the living. You learned how to layer shame until it felt like armor. Mira taught you how to breathe through your teeth. Said it warmed the air just enough to stop your throat from cracking in the night. Said it made you quieter, too. That mattered. Predators could smell a sharp breath. Cold wasn't the only thing hunting. You didn't ask what she meant. You just practiced the breathing until it became natural. Later, you caught yourself doing it in spring. That's how you knew winter never really left. It just moved inward. There were moments of beauty, strange, sharp ones. Ice on the window of a meat cart shaped like feathers. A dog curled beside a chimney, steam rising off its back like incense. Stars that blinked so hard they looked like they were freezing too. You didn't write them down. You just held them in your ribs, let them glow for a moment before the wind came back. Beauty was rare, but it was real. And it was enough to make you move your legs again when the numbness started whispering its quiet little lies. Sometimes you'd see children running through the frost, bundled in furs, cheeks red with life, and you'd feel something pull in your chest. Not envy, not quite, just distance. Like watching a story you used to be in but can't read anymore. You never resented them, but you memorized their laughter, held it like a coal. Something you might use later when your own breath failed you. And always when the dark settled deep, and the wind began its slow climb through the alleys, you'd return to your corner, your hollow, your borrowed bit of warmth, and whisper your name into your hands, just to feel it again, just to remind yourself that no matter how thin your body had become, you still existed, still had a voice, still had something left to say. You once asked a priest if God cared about cold bones. He hesitated just long enough to answer your question without words, gave you a crust of bread and a prayer with more breath than meaning. You thanked him anyway, not for the food, for the pause. Sometimes even a pause was enough to make you feel less like fog on glass. After that, you stopped asking questions with answers. You started talking to chimneys instead. Chimneys didn't lie. Chimneys just breathed. You figured that was closer to divine than most sermons you'd ever heard. One boy figured out how to line his coat with sheep's wool, illegally shaved, of course. Said he took it from a carcass. No one claimed. It stank like regret and sweat and rot, but it worked. We called him Woolskin. He'd sleep under bridges, layered like a story too thick to finish. Sometimes he'd let others crawl in beside him, no words exchanged, just silent thanks and shared stink. Warmth wasn't personal, it was communal. You learned to love the smell of something living beside you, even if it was half dead. You knew someone was dying when they started giving things away. That was the final generosity. A glove, a scarf, a bit of cheese saved too long. You didn't refuse. Refusal made it worse. You took the offering, held their hand, and promised to remember, even if you didn't. Even if they slipped from memory like ice from a boot heel. You lied kindly, because hope didn't need truth to work. It just needed friction. Something to burn against, even if only for a night. They say snow is quiet. That's only half true. It hides noise, makes it muffled. Shy. You'd walk through snow and feel like your own feet had secrets, but your stomach still growled. Your teeth still clicked. The wind still laughed through broken doors. Snow wasn't silence. It was pretense. It just made the world seem softer while it tried to kill you. You respected that. It was honest in a roundabout way. You slept near livestock when you could. Cows radiated heat like gods, slow-breathing, stupid gods that chewed their thoughts and shared their warmth. Chickens were trickier, skittish, stingy with their feathers, but every now and then you'd find one willing to roost near your leg. You didn't thank them. That felt absurd, but you looked at them differently after, like maybe animals were the only creatures who knew what warmth was really for. Fint once said the worst cold wasn't outside. It was waking up from a dream where you were warm. That moment your body remembered the lie before your brain caught up. That drop, you knew it too well. You'd dream of blankets, of fires that didn't burn out, of a room without wind. And then you'd wake to frost on your eyelashes and blood that moved like molasses. You stopped hoping for good dreams. Started wishing for no dreams at all. At least then the truth didn't have to punch its way in. There was a widow who used to toss her dishwater out the back door, just before midnight. Every night, same time. You timed it. Because that water steamed meant a fire inside. Meant a possible kindness. One night, you sat near the door, not asking, just being seen. She came out, saw you there, and said, "You smell worse than the dog." Then handed you a lump of boiled potato, warm in the center. You almost wept, called her sainted behind her back. She'd have smacked you for it. Sometimes the rich would toss their scraps into the alleys, thinking themselves charitable, bits of meat still clinging to bone, bread soaked through with ale. You learned to find the edible parts fast, not just before others but before the cold turned it solid. Nothing worse than trying to chew kindness that had frozen into a joke. You kept a knife in your sleeve for splitting bread, sometimes for splitting lines. You didn't use it often, but everyone knew you could. That helped more than the blade itself. One night you found a whole cloak, just lying there, draped on a post like it belonged to no one. You stood over it for an hour, waiting for the trick, waiting for the scam. Nothing came. So you took it, wore it like guilt, slept in it like grace, found a note in the pocket that said, "This helped me once. Now it's your turn." You never found who left it. That was the first time you believed in recycling of mercy. You started marking the days by smoke. If you saw chimney smoke early, it meant the house had extra wood, meant there might be warmth to steal from the wall, meant the family was alive enough to burn. If no smoke, it meant illness or absence or opportunity. You hated thinking that way, but frost rewired your heart, made it pragmatic. You didn't wish for misfortune. You just prepared to outlive it. There was an alley behind the butcher's that caught the sun for exactly 16 minutes each afternoon. The bricks there held heat better than skin. We called it the golden spine. You'd sit with your back against the wall and let the warmth soak in like stories. People came and went. No one talked. That kind of sun was too rare for conversation. You just closed your eyes and let your spine remember summer. And every night, as the sky hardened into ink, and the frost began to whisper again along the cracks in the walls, you gathered what little you had, your rags, your rocks, your breath, and shaped yourself into something that could survive until dawn. Not thrive, not smile, just last. And when morning came and your hands still moved, you whispered thanks to no one in particular, because in the end the only real prayer winter listened to was waking up. There was a method to the misery, a rhythm to it. You began to know the cold by name, not as a single cruel wall of air, but as variations of it. There was the gut cold that lived in your belly and made food taste like stone, the finger cold that turned laces and knots into puzzles for someone else's hands, the bone cold, which didn't hurt exactly, it just settled like bad news in your joints. And worst of all, the soul cold, which crawled in under your ribs and convinced you that no one anywhere had ever truly been warm. You once met a woman who wrapped her feet in sheep's bladder, tied shut with string, said her father had done the same when he'd lost both boots in a flood. It worked, sort of, kept the wind out, kept the wet from soaking through. You tried it once. The smell stayed with you for days, but so did the feeling in your toes. That was the exchange. Warmth in return for shame. You took that deal 100 times over. Dignity never saved fingers from blackening. The town square had a statue, some forgotten noble on horseback, bronze and bird-stained. But the stone base? That thing radiated heat in the late afternoon, even in winter. You and a few others would press your backs to it, steal what little warmth had soaked in through the day. Someone etched a line into the stone, just behind the horse's tail. He never bled for us, but he holds our heat. You didn't know who wrote it. You didn't care. It was true enough to be yours. There was a boy, maybe 11, who built a little nest out of straw and gutter scrapings, crawled into it like a hedgehog, teeth chattering, and stayed there through the night. You found him in the morning, alive and stunned, not from the cold, from surviving. That's the thing people don't understand. The worst part of freezing isn't dying, it's realizing you didn't. That now you have to go back into the world with less than you started with. Less heat, less hope, less anything. Fint lost a toe one week. Didn't even notice at first. Said it snapped off like an old carrot. Wrapped it in cloth, tossed it in the gutter. Don't need 10, he said. Never did. You asked if it hurt. He said, not as much as it will. That's what frostbite teaches you. Pain's not always the warning. Sometimes it's the absence that tells you you're in real trouble. That's when you learn to stop bragging about toughness. Toughness just gets you dead more dramatically. There were rumors of a convent downriver that let in strays, gave them broth, a cot, even a song or two. You thought about walking there once, packed what little you had, made it to the third hill before you changed your mind. Not because you didn't believe it, because if it wasn't true you might not make it back. Hope's heavy when you're starving. Better to stay where you know the edges of your suffering. Better the frost you've met than the warmth that might lie. You learned to spot danger by breath. The way someone breathed while they slept told you whether they were dreaming or dying. A shallow hiss, cold but survivable. A long rattling exhale, trouble. You once woke a man because his silence scared you. He cursed you out, then cried quietly into his knees. Didn't thank you, didn't need to. The fact that he cried meant he was still in there. You counted that as a win. One night, someone left a fire burning too long. Flames high, tongues dancing. It pulled in the wrong kind of attention. Guards, barkeeps, a man with a stick who called it a heathen's blaze. You all scattered. The fire died under a boot. The warmth lingered for maybe a minute longer. You stood nearby, watching the embers lose their glow. That's when you understood something cold and clear. Heat is only as good as your right to keep it, and most of you had none. You didn't beg much, not because of pride, because talking wasted heat. You begged, with your eyes, with your body, the slump of your shoulders, the way you hovered near warmth, like it might rub off if you were patient. Occasionally someone would toss you a coin or a bit of bread. You'd nod once, never twice. Too much movement made you dizzy. Besides, overthanking someone made them remember they gave. Best to let them forget. Made them more likely to do it again. One woman knitted fingerless gloves for anyone who asked. Her name was Hala. She didn't speak much, didn't look you in the eye, just measured your hands and gave you something stitched from old wool and silent grief. You still have yours. Holes in the palms now, but the wrists stay warm. When you wear them, you feel like part of something bigger than survival. You feel like part of a story that cared enough to mend itself. You started counting the days backward, not toward anything, just to measure how far from warm you were. Each dawn was one more since the last thaw. You lost count around 47. After that, numbers felt like vanity. You began counting fires seen, nights with sleep, meals with steam. That's what winter turns you into, a creature who survives by measuring warmth instead of time. And when spring did finally begin to whisper, soft and green-lipped, you didn't cheer. You watched, carefully, suspiciously, because early spring is a liar, a flirt. It gives you sun in the day and steals it back at night. You stayed wrapped, stayed wary, because no matter what the birds said or the buds promised, the frost hadn't given you permission yet. And until it did, you lived like a man still sleeping with one eye open. The frost was slow to leave, like a guest that didn't know when the party ended. Days warmed just enough to trick you into loosening your cloak, then the night would come back like a slap. You didn't trust spring, not at first. You walked slower, watched puddles freeze and thaw like the earth itself couldn't decide what kind of cruelty to commit. That was the hardest part. Hope flickering too early. You'd rather be frozen than fooled. Hope gets under the skin worse than cold. The snow began to rot around the edges. Not melt, rot. Turned to sludge that sucked at your feet and stank of old filth and forgotten sins. Everyone talked like things were improving, but the stink said otherwise. You stopped walking through alleys. Too slick, too many surprises underfoot. You found a high ledge behind the tannery and sat there most days, legs dangling, watching people slip in what used to be winter. That's how you knew you'd survived, when other people's falls didn't take you with them. Fint didn't make it. Last cold snap of the season, when everyone else had started pretending the danger was over, he curled up too early, too far from fire, with too few layers and too much trust. You found him stiff, eyes open, staring like he was still waiting for someone to finish a sentence. You closed them, took his rope belt. Not because it was valuable, because it had his shape. You wrapped it around your coat and felt heavier but not colder. That mattered. The streets grew louder again. Carts returned. Children started skipping instead of stumbling. People stopped looking through you and started around you. That was always the shift. In winter, they ignored you because they were scared. In spring, they ignored you because they were busy. You preferred the fear. At least it meant they saw you. Now you were just an obstruction in their blooming day. Something in the way of flowers. You got a splinter from an old barrel once. Big one, mean and wet. Got infected fast. By the time you noticed, your foot was swollen and full of fever. You limped to the healer's shed, offered a rhyme in exchange for a poultice. She didn't smile, didn't speak, just cleaned it, wrapped it, and slapped your head like a mother who knew better than to scold. That night, your fever broke like a frozen river. You dreamed of Fint. He was laughing, wearing 2 boots and no toes. The dog came back. The same one you'd seen huddled near the forge months before, still limping, still half-rib, but alive. You shared crusts with him, warmth too, called him Ember, not because he was fiery, because he glowed just enough to prove he wasn't dead. He stayed close from then on, didn't bark, didn't beg, just lay beside you like he had a right to. That was the only companionship that made sense. 2 bodies agreeing not to leave first. You started talking again, properly, not just to yourself or chimneys or dying fires, to people. Mira reappeared with a scabbed lip and a bag of dried pears. The twins were gone, run off, maybe found shelter. Jarin had a limp, Hala had more yarn. The faces were familiar, but thinner. You spoke in short bursts. It takes time to learn speech again after a winter of survival sounds. Words feel heavy after silence, but you let them land. Slowly, the market reopened. The colors came back, not all at once, but blue returned first, then green, then that ridiculous yellow someone always insists is cheerful. You stood at the edge and watched. Didn't go in. The market wasn't for you yet. Too much coin, too many assumptions. But the smell, that smell of spice and meat and fresh sweat, that was enough. That was worth standing still for. You heard music again? A lute, clumsy, off-key, beautiful. A boy with fingers too soft for winter, too stubborn to care. He played in front of the chapel, grinning like nothing bad had ever happened. You didn't hate him. Not really. You just didn't trust him yet. That kind of joy needed testing, needed to survive something. You hoped he would. Then you hoped you weren't turning into someone who thought like that. You found a coat. Not stolen, not abandoned, offered. The tailor's apprentice left it on the bench near the square, with a note that read, "This was my brother's. He won't need it again." You didn't ask what happened to the brother. Just tried the coat on. It fit wrong in the shoulders, perfect in the heart. You wore it like a thank you. Didn't leave a note, just kept walking. Warm. The frost never really left your bones. Even on warmer days, your fingers ached and your breath clouded earlier than others. But that was fine. That was yours. A reminder. Like a scar or a secret handshake. You didn't envy the ones who had forgotten winter already. You pitied them. Because forgetting means you're vulnerable again. You'd rather limp through spring than run into another cold unprepared. And when night came, and the wind curled soft instead of sharp, you let yourself lie down without planning to wake every hour. You let yourself close both eyes. You didn't dream of warmth. You were warmth. And for once, survival didn't feel like war. It felt like rest. There's a silence that only spring gives back to you. Not emptiness. Not absence. Relief. Like the land itself, exhales. And for the first time in months, so do you. The wind becomes gentler, less of a thief. Your breath doesn't vanish the second you release it. You hear birds again, and you don't flinch. You see sun on stone and don't rush to steal it before it disappears. The cold taught you to fight. Spring lets you unclench. Not all at once, not fully, but enough that your shoulders drop half an inch without permission. You start noticing things you forgot mattered. The feel of cloth that isn't stiff with ice. The sound of water that runs instead of freezes. A bruise on your thigh you didn't know you had because it finally hurts again. Hunger becomes appetite. Sleep becomes rest. Not a temporary coma to escape the wind. And when someone laughs, really laughs, you don't brace for it to turn cruel. You just let it ring, like a bell struck in a room you hadn't entered in years. Ember, the dog, follows you now, properly. He's yours. Or maybe you're his. He's still a mess. Limping, crust-eyed, always smelling like damp straw. But he's there. He curls beside you without asking. Wakes when you do. Growls at strangers like he knows what you've been through. You share every meal, even when there's barely enough. Because warmth, once shared, is hard to hoard again. You both know that. It's the only law you trust. The forge boys offered you work. Nothing steady. Just hauling coal, sweeping ash, clearing soot. They don't ask questions. Don't call you beggar or drifter or stray. Just you. The first time they handed you coin, you didn't spend it. Just held it. Cold metal. Hot, meaning. You thought about burying it. Thought about giving it away. In the end, you bought a knife. Not for defense. Not for show. For use. That was the moment you admitted you might keep living. You found Mira in the alley behind the weavers. She'd built a little lean-to with canvas scraps and stolen brick. Said she liked the feel of her own space. Said even 4 feet of wall could feel like a castle if it held your breath right. You gave her the wool gloves you'd patched with twine. She gave you a candle. You lit it in silence and watched it flicker like something worth listening to. You didn't talk about the cold. You didn't have to. You'd both survived it, which made you siblings in the oldest possible way. One morning, the frost didn't come back. That was how you knew. Not a ceremony. Not a trumpet. Just an absence. Your breath stayed invisible. The straw underfoot was just straw, not daggered with white. You didn't cheer. You just stood very still and let your skin register it like news too good to trust. Then you bent, picked up a rock, and tossed it into the distance. Just because you could, movement for pleasure. That was new. The innkeeper's wife started handing out soup at dusk. No words, just a glance, and a ladle. She never called it charity. You never called it home. But one night she slipped a bone into the bowl, thick with marrow. You nodded. She didn't smile. That was your favorite part. She didn't need to. Kindness doesn't always need a witness. Sometimes it just happens. And that's enough. You stopped flinching when people reached into their coats. For months, every gesture felt like a threat. A shove, a broom, a stone. Now it might be bread, might be cloth, might just be a wave. You weren't ready for gratitude, still aren't. But you're learning how to receive, how to say thank you without it sounding like a question, how to mean it. That's harder than it should be. Cold doesn't just freeze fingers, it freezes trust. There was a girl singing in the market. Young, wild-voiced, too loud for the hour. Her tune was a mess, her lyrics worse. But her joy, it was holy. You stood behind a barrel and just listened. Not because she was good, because she was trying. That's what moved you most. Not the song. The fact that she was offering something that didn't hurt. In a world that used to take everything, that felt revolutionary, you began collecting warmth. Not hoarding, cataloging. The places, the people, the moments, the forge wall at midday, Ember's body at night, the way Mira always started her fire with a sigh like it owed her something. You kept track of them, memorized them, because if winter came again, and it would, you needed to know where to go, what to carry, who would answer the knock. You caught yourself humming, not to stay awake, not to chase breath, just because. A tune with no words, no purpose, no fear. You hummed until someone else joined in. A child. Off-key. Perfect. You didn't look at them, didn't need to. The song was its own kind of warmth. Shared without touch, without name. That's the first thing frost tries to kill. The unnecessary things that make life bearable. And that's how you fight it. By humming. Anyway. And as dusk folds over the now soft roofs, and the world lets itself breathe again, you sit not in hiding, not in fear, but in presence. You're not healed. You're not whole. But you're warm. And for the first time in a long, bitter season, that feels like more than enough. You learn in time that surviving isn't the same as living. Surviving is teeth clenched, jaw tight, eyes scanning every shadow like it owes you an explanation. Living is letting your fingers unfurl without checking if someone's watching. You didn't realize how long you'd been holding your breath until the first spring rain came. Not the sleet, not the ice dagger drizzle, but the warm kind, soft as a lullaby. It hit your face and you smiled, full and stupid, like the sky had finally remembered your name. You started seeing other survivors in a different light, the ones who made it through. Their eyes weren't so sunken now, their hands moved like they belonged to them again. Some had new boots, some had new teeth, but the real difference was in how they walked. Not just to get somewhere, but as if they might stay once they arrived. It was strange. You'd all been feral so long, anything that looked like comfort felt borrowed. Still, it was good to see. You didn't feel left behind, just understood. The chapel began leaving its doors open. Not all day, just for the hour before dusk. No sermons, no incense, just warmth. A fire in the back, a bucket of broth, a place to sit without explanation. No one asked if you believed. No one checked if you tithed. They just looked at your boots, your hands, the way your body leaned slightly to the left, like you were still dodging wind. That was enough. You sat by the fire, fingers open to the heat, and remembered what it meant to receive without cost. Mira started telling stories again. Short ones, broken like pottery but worth the glue. She'd sit near the baker's shed and talk to whoever sat close. Stories about the winters she survived, the summers she ruined, the child she'd lost to sickness and never named. She didn't cry when she told it. That was the strength of frost. It teaches you how to bleed slowly. You listened not to learn, but to join. Every story you heard made you feel less like a ghost and more like a page. The wind still stung sometimes. Nights when it swept down from the hills, sharp as judgment, but it didn't get in like it used to. Not all the way. Your layers were better now, your fire spots better chosen. You knew where the bricks still held heat. You knew which walls sang when the wind passed. That's what winter gave you. Not scars. Maps. You'd earned every one. You traced them with your breath, and for once they led somewhere softer. The Reeve passed you on the road one morning. Didn't flinch. Didn't mutter. Just nodded. That was the whole thing. A nod. Smallest kindness in the world. But you remembered a time when his eyes had skipped over you like you were dirt. Or, worse, air. Now you were at least person-shaped. Maybe even human. Maybe. You didn't expect a title. Just a space in the world where you didn't have to apologize for being cold. You tried to write something again. Not for trade. Not for pity. Just for you. The words didn't come easily. You'd spent so long thinking in heat and hunger, it was hard to summon anything poetic, but you wrote 5 lines. All of them about Ember's tale. None of them rhymed, but it felt good, like moving an old joint. A little stiff, but possible. You tucked it under your cloak and promised yourself there'd be more. There's a tree by the crossroads now, ribbon-tied and scribbled with names. The villagers say it's for wishes. You call it the memory tree. Some nights, when your breath still ghosts the air, you sit beneath it and listen. People whisper to the bark like it answers. You never speak, you just sit. Because sometimes silence is the best kind of prayer. The kind winter taught you, the kind spring hasn't ruined. A boy named Tom started walking with you. Quiet, limping, never asked for anything, just fell into step, like he'd been waiting to match a pace. You didn't mind. You knew the look in his eyes, the kind that said he was still half asleep from the cold, still waking into himself. You shared dried beans. He shared half a song. You didn't talk about where you'd come from. That wasn't the point. The point was walking forward. They let you work in the granary now, a few hours a day, stacking, lifting, watching for rot, paid in coin and soup, and a nod from the steward. You didn't need thanks, just the weight of grain in your hands. Something solid, something that felt like it would last through another frost. You swept the floors slower than you needed to, not out of laziness, out of reverence. The warmth there wasn't just heat, it was earned. The frost is mostly gone now, but part of it lives in your knuckles. In the way you scan a room for exits, in the way your dreams always start in the dark. You carry it with you not as fear but as wisdom, the kind you don't write down, the kind you nod toward when the air smells too still. You don't dread winter's return. You just prepare for it, like an old friend who sometimes forgets how to behave. And as twilight stretches her fingers across rooftops and shutters creak open to let in songs instead of smoke, you walk, not to escape, not to hide, but to exist, present, breathing, still shaped by cold, but no longer owned by it. This is how warmth begins again. Quietly, persistently, without apology. There was a time you believed warmth was something only stolen, borrowed in fragments from chimney breath and guarded hearths. Never something you could keep, but the seasons, slow and stubborn as they are, have a way of loosening those old thoughts. One morning, you woke to birdsong. Not a warble, not a warning, just song. No one was screaming, no one was dying, just the sky, remembering how to speak. You didn't cry, you just listened with your whole body, like the song might crawl under your skin and light something. You began sweeping the chapel stairs without being asked, not for coin, not for thanks, just for rhythm. The broom gave you structure, a place to stand and move and matter. One of the sisters brought you a wool hat, stitched by shaky hands loose at the seams. You wore it anyway, not because it fit, but because it felt like someone saw the shape of your head and thought, that deserves protection. You still haven't taken it off. Tom, quiet, wide-eyed Tom, started laughing in his sleep. Not every night. Just once, soft and startled, like joy caught him by surprise. You didn't wake him, you just watched his face. The corner of his mouth pulled upward like it forgot the rest of him was still learning how to smile. He never told you what the dream was. Didn't have to. That kind of laughter only comes from a memory that survived. You figured whatever he dreamed about, it must have been warm. You helped build a fence last week. Nothing fancy, just wood and sweat and a lot of guessing. The carpenter didn't ask where you'd slept the winter before. Didn't care that you wrapped your fingers too slow or that your boots were still held together with twine. He said, "Hammer's yours," and kept talking like you belonged. And for a whole day you did. You built something. It stayed standing. You didn't know what to do with that kind of permanence. People talk to you different now. Not with reverence. Not with pity. Just normally. As if you've always been here. As if you were never curled against a dung heap. Never begged heat from a stranger's lantern. One woman asked you how to start a fire in wet wind. You showed her. She said thank you. Not like she was surprised you knew, but like she was glad someone still remembered. You smiled. Taught her the trick with the birch bark. It's good to be useful. There's an old man who swears you saved his life. Says he saw you sleeping under the fish cart, and something about the way your hand curled made him keep walking instead of lying down beside you. You don't remember him. You don't remember sleeping under the cart. But you nod when he says it. Let him believe in that version. We're all surviving someone else's story. Half the time. Might as well let a few of them end better than they began. The air has changed. It's not just warmer. It's lighter. Easier to move through. You don't feel like you're pushing against it anymore. You walk taller. Not because the pain is gone, but because you've gotten used to carrying it differently. Some aches you stretch out, others you wear like a scarf. Part of the ensemble. You've stopped hiding your limp. If someone asks, you say it's the price of remembering what cold really means. You saw a child give bread to another child. No parent nearby. No instruction. Just one hand reaching out and another receiving. No guilt. No performance. You sat down after that, just sat. Not because you were tired, but because you didn't know how else to honor the moment. Kindness without fear, that's the rarest warmth. Harder to find than fire, softer than straw. You didn't interrupt, you just watched it happen, like someone watching spring bloom from beneath the ice. You and Mira fixed up her lean-to, added canvas, shored the bricks, found a bit of oilcloth to catch the leaks. It's still crooked, still sways when the wind gets pushy, but it doesn't leak. That's what you both said after the first proper rain. It doesn't leak. like it was a prayer or a spell. You slept there once, shoulder to shoulder, not for warmth, just for presence. No fire, no talking, just two people under something they built themselves. That was enough. You think about Fint more now, not as a loss, as a marker, a signpost that says, here's how far I've come. He wouldn't want songs. He'd want blankets distributed, boots passed down. He'd want you to keep walking and not make a fuss. You carry his rope belt still, not on you but in your pocket, coiled like a question you never quite got to ask. You rub it when the wind shifts, just to say you remember. You've stopped watching the horizon. You used to stare at it like it held a rescue, some caravan, some promise. Now you look around, at walls, at fires, at people. The life you kept waiting for, turns out it was here, messy, hard, unfinished, but present. You aren't waiting anymore, you're living, even when it hurts. And when the sky closes its eye for the night, and the stars come out in crooked constellations you still don't know by name, you pull your blanket to your chin, close your eyes and think, not warm enough to forget, but warm enough to rest. And that, after everything, feels like a kind of victory. There are things you carry now that don't weigh you down. Strange. That. A strip of cloth from Mira's old tunic still smells like burnt onions and pine. A coin with no value, rubbed smooth, edges worn by someone else's thumb long before it ever reached your palm. A stub of charcoal tucked into your boot for no real reason. These aren't supplies. They're anchors. Reminders that you've existed in more than one season, more than one shape. Winter tried to turn you into nothing. These scraps say otherwise. Tom asked if frostbite makes your skin remember. You told him yes. Not just in the fingertips, where the burn used to bite, but in the way your body tenses when a breeze hits just wrong. You said it like a joke, but it wasn't one. The cold teaches you to flinch from memories, even after they've passed. You still wake up sometimes and check your toes before you even open your eyes. It's instinct, like breathing, or guilt. You don't try to stop it anymore. You just accept that survival rewrites your reflexes. The shoemaker gave you a pair of boots. Not new, but dry, sturdy. Yours had long since surrendered, the soles more whole than hope. You didn't ask for them, didn't even know the man's name. He handed them over like he was passing along a curse, then turned back to his shop and shut the door. You wore them until the blisters faded. Then you whispered thank you into the leather and kept walking. Every step felt like a sentence you never thought you'd finish. A child asked you once if you'd ever seen the sky freeze. You said yes. Told him about the night the stars stopped twinkling because even light didn't want to move. You said the sky looked like it was holding its breath, just like you were. He nodded like he understood, even though he didn't. Then he gave you a berry tart from his pocket, squashed, sticky, still warm. You bit into it and tasted sugar for the first time in weeks. It made your teeth ache and your heart hurt, all at once. You visited Fint's spot behind the smithy, sat there in the same curve of stone, the same patch of wall that had once been his throne of frost. Someone else is using it now. A boy with red eyes and no hat. You didn't disturb him, just dropped half a loaf near his feet and walked away. Fint would have grumbled, but he would have approved. That's how the warmth spreads, quietly, through gesture, not gospel. The frost has lost its edge, but not its memory. You still see it, clinging to the morning grass, hiding in the shadows where the sun forgets to reach. You respect it now, like you might respect a thief who once tried to kill you but failed. You nod when you see it. Tip your chin like two soldiers passing each other on opposite sides of peace. There's no hatred left, just a mutual understanding. You both tried your best to win. You taught Tom how to light a fire without flint. Just a string, a stick, and time. He struggled, cursed, nearly gave up. Then it caught. Just a spark. But it was enough. His face lit up like dawn, You said, don't worship the flame, worship the trying. He nodded like that was scripture. You never meant to be a teacher, but you've got enough scars to qualify now. And if those scars can buy someone else a warmer night, it seems a fair trade. You passed the convent again. Thought about stopping. You didn't. Not because you weren't welcome, because you didn't need to. That was the difference. The old you would have knocked until your knuckles bled. The you who'd found his breath again. He walked past, coat buttoned, dog at his side, hunger in check, not full, just not desperate. You don't turn down charity, but when you can walk past it without collapse, that's its own kind of prayer. The tree at the crossroads now holds more ribbons than branches, names of the lost, promises for spring, bits of verse carved into bark. You found one that read, I almost didn't make it. I did anyway. You stood there until your knees locked. Then you added one of your own. Not a name, just a mark. 3 lines carved low into the trunk, like a signature that only the cold would recognize. You and Mira started keeping count, not of days but of nights without panic. It's a different kind of calendar. You mark them with chalk beside her lean-to, 1 tick for each evening you don't wake gasping. You're up to 9 now. That's a season, in its own way. Not by the sun or the moon, by the absence of fear, by the presence of something like peace. You didn't know healing could be so quiet. There's a young man performing songs in the market now. He's terrible, always off-key. Tries to rhyme hunger with thunder like it's never been done before. But people throw him coin, not for the skill, for the effort. You did once, then sat beside him and taught him 3 better lines. Didn't ask for credit. He used one the next day. Sang it like it came from his bones. You let it be his. That's how stories live longest, when you stop trying to own them. And when the moon rises pale and bashful over a village that's finally remembering how to soften, you stretch out your legs beside a fire you helped build. Dog at your side, hands wrapped around a bowl of something warm. You don't feel lucky. You feel here. And that, after all this time, is worth more than any heat you ever had to steal. You've begun to measure people by how they move through cold, not just how they dress for it, or whether they keep their fingers wrapped in wool, but how they treat others when the wind bites. The baker who leaves the fire going just a little longer after closing. The stable boy who forgets to lock the hayloft door. The girl who drops her scarf by accident near the bench where old Revan always sits. These aren't grand gestures, just flares in the frost. But they're the kind you remember when you're shivering and every sound feels like teeth. You and Mira started a kind of quiet ritual. Nothing official, just a practice. Every 3rd night, you light a candle together and sit in silence. No talking, no stories, just heat shared between 2 bodies who know. Some nights, the flame flickers like it might leave you, and you both hold your breath. Other nights, it burns steady, proud. You don't worship the candle, but you respect it. It's a living thing, that little fire. It never asks why you need it. Tom brought you a stone, said it was warm. You held it and smiled. Not because it was warm. It wasn't. But because he believed it might be. That's how you know he's healing. Belief like that doesn't survive frost unless it's been earned. You kept the stone, put it under your blanket at night. Not for heat, but for memory. Tom doesn't remember the worst of the cold the way you do. And maybe that's the point. Maybe he won't have to. A merchant came through with a cart full of cloaks, thick and too bright. He shouted prices you couldn't afford and ignored the shivering boy watching from the corner. Mira stepped up, said 4 words. Quiet, firm. He survived the freeze. The merchant paused, looked at the boy, then threw down a cloak. Not the best one, not the worst. The boy ran off with it like it was stolen. It wasn't. It was owed. Mira said nothing else. That's why you trust her more than anyone with a title. You started sleeping indoors once a week. A woman near the edge of the village has a shed she doesn't use. Told you if you keep it swept, it's yours on Wednesdays. You do, carefully. Like the floor's a verse you're still writing. There's no fire inside, but the roof doesn't leak, and the walls remember sunlight better than most. That first night you slept there, you dreamed of nothing. That was the gift. Not joy, not fantasy, just stillness. Finally, the Forge boys gave you a nickname, Smokejaw. You asked why. They said you always look like you've got something to say, but the wind stole it. You laughed. Deep, the kind that rattles loose pain from places you forgot to check. The name's stuck. Even Ember barks when they say it. You don't mind. It's better than Beggar or Ghost, or the names they used before they learned your rhythm. You found an old glove behind the bakery, child-sized, furred on the inside. You almost walked past it, then thought of the boy with the red eyes in Fint's old spot. You left it where he'd find it. Didn't leave a note. Didn't need to. That's the rule now. If you have more than enough, you don't. You give, quietly. That's how warmth stays moving, like breath passed mouth to mouth. The wind came back strong last night. Not winter, not yet. But the kind that makes you tighten your collar and double-check your fire. You stayed awake longer than usual, watching the door, listening for whistles through the cracks. But nothing came. You were ready this time. Layered. Fed. Not alone. That's what survival looks like now. Not panic, but preparation. You still don't trust the weather, but you trust yourself a little more. There's a new girl at the chapel. Young, sharp-eyed, asks questions too fast. She wanted to know what frostbite felt like, you said. Like your fingers are remembering someone else's mistake. She blinked, nodded, wrote it down. Later she pressed something into your hand. A stitched scrap of fabric shaped like a heart. Awful craftsmanship. Beautiful intent. You didn't ask what it meant. You just tucked it into your coat. Carried it like warmth that hadn't happened yet. Mira braided your hair one afternoon. Said it was looking wild. You told her wild was the only thing keeping it warm. She smacked your shoulder. Smiled. It wasn't about the braid. It was about closeness. About letting someone touch you without flinching. You sat there while her fingers worked. And for the first time in years you felt safe enough to be still. That's the part no one tells you about surviving cold. It teaches you movement. Stillness is something you have to learn back. You saw a woman walking barefoot through the mud. Not from poverty, from grief. She'd just lost her child, and the shoes were too heavy. That's what someone whispered. You stepped off the path and gave her your scarf. She didn't speak, didn't even take it from you. You placed it on her shoulders and walked away. Later someone asked why. You said because frost doesn't care who it comes for. And I remember what it feels like to be chosen. And as the coals burn down, and the story's quiet, and the last bowl is scraped clean, you lie beside Ember, Mira's candle flickering near your toes, and you whisper, not a prayer, not a poem, just a simple truth. I'm still here, not loud, not proud, just real. And in a world where the frost once called you nobody, that might be the warmest thing you've ever said. You don't count winters anymore. You count the layers. The scars that itch when the nights get longer. The faces still here when the first breath fogs. You used to dread the shortening of the days, that quiet march toward darkness. Now, you meet it like an old rival. Not welcome, not feared, just expected. And this time, you've got allies. Firewood, a patched coat, a plan. You walk through town with your hands still in your sleeves. Sure, but you're not hunched anymore. You've earned your spine back. The woman with the soup pot, no one knows her name, now serves by candlelight. No more ladle, just bowls lined up on the stones, and people know what to do. You take your share, help the next person without being asked. That's the new order. Quiet kindness, no ceremony. You leave a stick of kindling in return, or a rhyme carved into the handle. You started one that just said, heat moves fastest when shared. Someone added a second line the next day, better than yours. You didn't mind. Mira caught a cough. Not a winter killer, but enough to worry. You brought her broth. Stayed by the door, hands in your pockets. Heart on your sleeve. She waved you off, said, "I've slept through worse." You believed her. But you left a pouch of time and a line, folded into cloth anyway. Your breath matters. She didn't mention it later. Just brewed tea and handed you a cup without words. Some warmth needs no explanation. Tom asked what dying of cold feels like. You told him slowly, truthfully, said it was like becoming fog, losing yourself layer by layer, until you don't know where the edge is anymore. His face went still. Then he said, "I don't want to be fog." You nodded. Then keep walking. You didn't need to tell him the rest. He already knows the frost is patient. It doesn't need to chase you. It waits. But this time you're moving faster. There's a pair of boots nailed to the wall outside the granary. Old, cracked, useless to most. But someone stuffed them with straw and tucked a note inside. These walked through it. You see people stop and stare. No one takes them. That's not the point. The boots are a monument, not a donation. A quiet reminder of what was endured. You don't tell anyone those were yours, but you do visit them once a week, just to nod, just to say, "I outlived you." A boy fell through the ice near the mill pond. Not deep, just enough to shock his lungs and crack his courage. You pulled him out, peeled your coat off, wrapped him fast. People stared. You didn't. You just muttered a line under your breath, an old one, meant for nights worse than this. Later, his mother brought you bread, didn't look you in the eye, just placed it in your hands and walked away. That's how gratitude works now. No bows, no praise, just calories and quiet. You've begun carrying matches, real ones. A luxury. Someone traded them to you for a story. You told the one about the man who slept beside a cow for 3 months and named her Lady Ember. They laughed, called you a liar. You shrugged. You weren't there. You light one match every morning now, not to start a fire but to feel ready. That little flare is your anthem, the smallest kind of defiance. And it works. You think of frost, now the way some think of old lovers. You remember where it touched you, where it lingered longest. You don't romanticize it, but you don't curse it either. You carry it in your rhythm. The way your fingers find seams in gloves. The way you angle your face to block wind. You walk through warm streets and still check for shelter out of habit. That's not fear. That's experience. The kind you pass down like flint and bread. Mira built a second wall for her lean-to. A real wall, stone and timber. You helped her raise it. She didn't thank you, just handed you a nail and nodded. It felt like a knighting. She sleeps easier now, doesn't cough as much. Sometimes she even snores. That sound used to bother you. Now, it's a lullaby. Proof that someone near you has found rest deep enough to forget survival for a few hours. That's sacred. You overheard someone in the tavern say, "The cold isn't coming back like last year." You didn't correct them. You just sipped your drink and let them believe. It's not your job to remind the world what it costs to survive. It's your job to keep surviving in a way that makes warmth possible for someone else. You've stopped warning people, started arming them, with stories, with advice, with a steady presence when the fire dims. Embers grown gray around the mouth, still limps, still guards your back like he's waiting for frost to sneak up again. You scratch his ear each night and say, "Not this year, boy. Not this time." He doesn't believe you. That's fine. He stays close. That's better than belief. That's faith. And that's what frost never understood. It can steal your fire, but not the reason you lit it in the first place. And when the stars begin to blink and settle, and the village curls into its blankets and its prayers, you lie down beside the fire with your scars, your dog, your name intact, and you let the night pass without dread. That, in the end, is all the victory you ever needed. There's a crack in the chapel wall where sunlight lands for just 12 minutes each morning. You sit in it when you can, coat open, palms up like a beggar receiving heat from a silent god. No sermons, no hymns, just light. It feels like someone is listening without interrupting. Mira calls it your sunbath. Tom once tried to sit there first just to tease you. You gave him the space, watched him squint into the warmth, and try to pretend it wasn't a blessing. After that, he started calling it the miracle crack. You let him. Let anyone name the things that keep them breathing. The boy with the red eyes is still at Fint's wall. Different now, has boots. Eats slower, like he trusts the next meal will come. You still haven't spoken, not properly. But the other day he passed you a bit of cloth, stitched poorly into the shape of a flame. You took it, nodded once. No one needs to say the word thanks anymore. Not in this world. The cold taught you all to speak in gesture, not grammar. You've noticed fewer hands shaking, fewer coughs held behind sleeves. People walk with a bit more surety now. It's not confidence, not pride, just balance. Like they've remembered how to move without bracing for collapse. That's what spring gives you. Not joy, but rhythm. You don't celebrate it. You keep pace with it. You walk like a man who knows the ice can come back, but isn't afraid of meeting it again. Tom's voice is cracking, deeper by the week. He hates it. Says it makes him sound like a man. You told him, that's what happens when you keep surviving. He rolled his eyes, but you saw the truth hit him. You remember when your own voice changed. It wasn't puberty. It was the night you shouted for help, and no one came. That's when it dropped. That's when it got real. Tom doesn't need to know that yet. Let him think it's age. Let him keep the softness a little longer. There's a new woman sweeping the corner near the butcher's. She used to wear shoes with buttons. Now it's burlap and twine. You don't ask her story. She doesn't ask yours. But she sweeps the same spot every morning. And that's all the introduction you need. You leave a crust of bread on the barrel when you can. She takes it without looking. One day you'll speak. Or maybe you won't. Not all relationships are built with words. Mira carved a sign and hung it on the edge of her lean-to. Don't knock. Just breathe. You helped her hang it. She smacked your hand when you fussed over the angle. Later that night, 2 boys crawled in beside the fire, said nothing, and just sat. Mira nodded at the sign, said, "It's working." You didn't answer. You were too busy watching the way the fire lit their faces like forgiveness. The Forge boys still call you Smokejaw, but it's turned into something gentle. They toss you coins for errands, offer stew without asking if you're hungry. One gave you a comb. You laughed. Said, "What do I need with that?" He shrugged. "Looks like your beard's got opinions." You kept the comb. Used it that night. You didn't say anything when you saw your reflection in the well. Just nodded, like you'd bumped into someone who used to scare you. You've started carrying string. No special reason. Just a habit. You use it to fix loose hems, wrap parcels, hold the world together a little better than before. Mira calls you the threadman. Says it's fitting. The way you stitch things that might otherwise fall apart. You wrapped a bit of string around the cracked handle of your old cup. It still leaks sometimes, but it holds. You like that. Imperfect, but functional, like you. The frost hasn't left entirely. It lingers in corners, behind shutters, under carts, but it's lazy now. Not hunting, just haunting. You step around it the way you would an old bruise, aware but unafraid. It's a shadow, not a scream. And shadows don't get to keep you anymore. The dog's begun sleeping on his back, legs in the air, snoring like he owns the dirt. That's how you know he feels safe. Animals don't fake it. They only rest like that when the ground isn't a threat. You tried it once. Lay flat, arms out, let the earth hold you. It felt wrong at first, like you were too visible. But then the sky blinked above you and nothing happened. No frost, no boots, just space. You didn't sleep, but you rested. That's a start. Someone started planting herbs behind the smithy. Mint, mostly. Smells too sharp to be accidental. You leave scraps of leather there in trade. Someone keeps taking them. It's a barter with no names, no rules. Just needs and answers. You've stopped needing introductions. You just show up and act like you belong. Most of the time it works. And when the wind slides in from the hills and brushes your face without malice, and the fire sighs low beside you, and Mira mutters in her sleep about honey and summer fruit, you lean back, scratch the dog, and say nothing, because in this moment, nothing needs saying. The cold taught you to survive. The warmth? It's teaching you how to stay. You spent the morning sharpening sticks. Not for defense, though that instinct never quite dies, but for kindling. Tom watched you, confused. "We have firewood," he said. You nodded. "Not everyone does." You bundled the sticks, wrapped them in twine, and left them under the tavern bench where the wind hits hardest. By dusk, they were gone. That's how you measure success now. Not in praise or thanks, but in absence. If the thing you offered disappears, it meant someone lived another night because of it. The shoemaker's daughter gave you a pair of socks, hand-stitched, uneven, dyed with crushed berries. You didn't ask why, just took them like a blessing you didn't expect, but would not waste. When you put them on, they itched like kindness. You wore them until your ankles forgot they ever froze. That night, you dreamed about your mother's hands, not her face, not her voice, just her hands, holding something warm. Not you, maybe, but something that once made her feel safe. The man who used to spit at you on wash day gave you half a cabbage, no explanation, just dropped it beside your bowl and kept walking. You didn't forgive him. That's not required. But you roasted it with root ends and a pinch of stolen salt, and when the steam hit your face, you let it in. You said, maybe, out loud. Just that. Maybe things change. Maybe people do. You didn't repeat it. Didn't need to. Some words work better whispered once. Ember chased a goose and slipped on the stones, rolled into a barrel. You laughed hard enough to scare 3 children. Mira said it was the first real laugh she'd heard from you since frost season. You shrugged. It was a very stupid goose, but inside you felt something shift. Laughter that doesn't come from relief or madness, that's a rare thing. When it shows up, you feed it. You let it stretch out its legs and sit beside you like a friend who knows better than to stay long. A girl offered you a daisy, dirt still clinging to the roots. You didn't know what to do with it. Mira planted it in a broken spoon, said if it blooms you have to name it. You've never named a plant before, never trusted anything that soft. But you check it every morning, talk to it in your head, told it once, if you live, I will too. You weren't sure if that was a promise or a threat. Either way, the green looks stronger each day. There's a song in the village now, passed from mouth to mouth, like gossip with rhythm, about a man who lived through 6 winters and still walks like he owns the frost. You think it's about you. The lyrics are wrong. They say your eyes glow and your boots never crack. But the tune is gentle, and when children hum it, they do so with wonder, not fear. That's the strange thing about stories. They clean your dirt, polish your scars, and hand you back to the world like you were always this holy. You let the lie breathe. Mira keeps a journal now, not every day, just fragments, lists of warmths, bowl of barley, sun on left cheek, ember's tail flick. You added a line once, first fire made with wet wood. She looked at it like it was a gift, said, I didn't know you wrote. You said, I forgot I could. That night you both wrote by candlelight until the wax gave out. You didn't save the page, you just did it. Not everything sacred gets archived. You found a boy crying near the stables. Wouldn't say why, wouldn't speak at all, so you sat beside him, pressed a warm rock into his palm, and hummed the tune from the story song, off-key, slow. By the 2nd verse he wiped his nose. By the 3rd he leaned into you. Didn't ask your name, didn't need to. That's the new language now, fire passed hand to hand without needing to be fire at all. Mira taught you how to patch a blanket with leather. You taught her how to break ice without cracking the bucket. Tom taught both of you how to heat stones so they don't explode near the fire. Knowledge gets passed around like stew now, simmered, shared, sometimes spilled, always replenished. You used to hoard what you knew, thinking that made you powerful. Now you give it away freely. And funny thing, you feel stronger for it. The frost gave you your name back. Not in full, not like it was before, but piece by piece. As the nights grew less cruel, you began to own yourself again. First your hands, then your walk, then the way your voice didn't shake when asking for things. Eventually your name stopped sounding like someone else's failure. It sounded like you, Smokejaw, or whatever comes after. Ember brought you a dead bird, dropped it on your foot, proud as a prince. You buried it under Mira's spoon plant, said a few lines that felt like truth. Tom asked if it was a prayer. You said, sort of. It's a pause. He nodded. That's better than a prayer. And maybe he's right. Maybe the act of stopping long enough to say something kind is all we ever really needed. Maybe that's how you keep the frost from coming back too fast. And as the night wraps itself gently around the rooftops and the smell of wet hay and fire ash mix in the air like an old song, you sit beside a dog, a friend, and a barely alive plant, and you know without speaking that this is what survival looks like after. Not clean, not easy, but rooted, still breathing, still here. There's a spot behind the tannery where the sun hits at just the right angle to make a person forget winter. It's not beautiful. Still smells like old hides and hot lye, but the stone there holds warmth long after the light's gone. You've taken to sitting there in the late afternoon, arms around your knees, eyes half closed. Sometimes you talk, sometimes you don't. No one bothers you. Even the workers have learned. Some silences are doing work. This one is melting things you didn't know were still frozen inside you. You caught your reflection in a puddle. Didn't recognize it. Not at first. Your hair's longer. Skin's darker from sun. Face thinner, but somehow more sturdy. You leaned in, expecting to see the same haunted thing that used to meet you in icy glass. Something shaped by hunger and nights spent begging fires to last. But what you saw looked like someone who'd made it through. You didn't smile, but you didn't look away either. That felt like a kind of healing. The innkeeper's son brought you a loaf yesterday. Still warm, still steaming, wrapped in a bit of linen that smelled like thyme. No note, no fanfare, just bread, set gently on your lap like an apology he didn't know how to voice. You nodded once. He nodded back. Ran off before either of you said a word. You tore the loaf in half and gave the rest to Mira. She said, "You make quiet look easy." You said, "I've had practice." She didn't argue. You saw frost on a rooftop that morning. Just a lace of it. Decorative, not dangerous. But your body reacted before your mind did. Shoulders tensed. Breath shortened. Fingers reached for warmth. Then you stopped, exhaled, and chose not to be afraid. That's new. The cold isn't gone. It never really leaves. But now it passes through you like a memory you've made peace with. You still dress in layers. Still check the sky. But now you do it with your chin up. Mira's lean-to has walls now. Real ones. And a roof patched with tar and old wool. It leaks less. Sways less. Feels like it might last a full season without begging for mercy. You helped her hang a cloth over the doorway, stitched with a symbol neither of you could name. Just something that felt right. Maybe it's a rune. Maybe it's just thread and hope. Either way, when people see it, they pause. Like the shelter behind it means something more than wood and windbreak. You've started giving advice. Real advice. Not the kind shouted over your shoulder while fleeing snow, but the kind offered beside a fire, calm and simple. Start low, feed it slow, don't chase the flame, invite it. It's not just about fires, but they don't need to know that yet. You've found that people listen more when you talk softly. Survival gave your words weight. Now you use them carefully, like matches. like promises. Tom started drawing. Badly. Mostly dogs. And shapes that might be trees. But he does it with the focus of someone trying to remember something before it leaves. He asked you once, "Did you ever draw?" You shook your head. "Didn't have time for art," he said. "Then I'll draw for both of us." That night, he sketched you curled by the fire. You looked wrong. Too tall, too clean. But you didn't say so. The boy sees what he needs to. That's worth more than accuracy. Ember's ear is torn again, probably chasing rats through briars. You cleaned it while he licked your hand. Unconcerned. "You're an idiot," you muttered. He wagged his tail like you'd sung him a love song. Mira watched and said, "You treat him better than most people." You shrugged. "He's never lied to me. That puts him ahead." She laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was true enough to hurt. Someone planted onions near the chapel. You can smell them in the early hours, damp soil, sweet rot, green life pushing up through memory. You left 3 stones beside the sprouts. No reason, just instinct. Later, someone arranged them into a circle. Then someone added a feather. You don't know what it means. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. That's the thing about warmth. It teaches people to make meaning even where there isn't any. You found an old man curled behind the bakery wall, shivering, eyes glassy. You wrapped your coat around him without asking. Stayed until he slept. When he woke, he asked your name. You said, "Nobody important." He nodded. "The best kind." That stayed with you. That night, you rewrote your old name in the dirt, then erased it. Didn't feel like it fit anymore. What people call you now is enough. Titles are for tombstones. You're not done living yet. Mira stitched a second blanket. Bright thread, this time. Purple and green. She said, "Frost hates color, so let's give it something to choke on." You wrapped it around your shoulders like armor, like defiance. When a passerby sneered, you grinned. That's new too. You're not hiding anymore. The warmth inside you isn't a secret. It's a flag. And if it makes someone else brave enough to crawl out of the cold, then every stitch was worth it. And as the fire hums low, and your belly is full enough, and the night doesn't threaten but rests, you close your eyes beside a dog who trusts you, a friend who snores, and a roof you helped hold up, and you think, not with fear, not with longing, but with certainty, I will survive the next frost, and the one after, and the one after that. Because I've learned how to make spring from ash. You wake to birds now, not wind. That's the clearest sign of the change. Not warmth, not green, sound. Birds don't waste their songs on hopeless mornings. When they sing, it means the world has shifted, even if just enough to try again. Tom sleeps through them. Mira grumbles. Ember chases shadows on the wall. But you listen, carefully. Because winter made you fluent in silence, and now sound feels like a new language worth learning. You don't sing with them, not yet. But you hum. That's enough. You saw a man wearing your old coat. The one you left behind weeks ago after patching it into something barely worthy of the name. He didn't know it was yours. Didn't matter. He held it tight around himself like a secret. You almost said something. Then you didn't. You just watched him disappear into an alley that used to be yours too. You whispered, "Stay warm," like a spell, then turned away. That coat's job isn't to remember you. It's to keep someone else breathing now. The well has new carvings. Not names. Phrases. Short truths. Mira started them. Cold is patient. Eat slow. Share your fire. You added one too. Sleep with your back to the wall and your hope facing in. Someone etched a sun beside it. Another person added a line below. Hope burns longer than frost. The words don't belong to any of you anymore. They're communal scripture now. Scratched into stone, passed in silence, memorized by anyone who needs reminding. The shoemaker's daughter gave you another gift. A tin whistle. Said she found it in her brother's chest. Unused. He never made it to spring, she said, then walked away. You held it for a while, cold and useless, then blew once, The sound was thin, sharp, strange. Mira covered her ears. Tom laughed. Ember howled. You tried again anyway, not to make music, just to prove you could create something that didn't hurt. A traveler passed through, wrapped in furs, mouthful of stories, told tales of cities where winter never bites, where bread is soft and sleep is safe. He asked where the inns were. You pointed. He asked if you'd ever been farther than this valley. You said, "No, but winter goes everywhere." He didn't understand. That was fine. He wasn't meant to. Some knowledge is only earned through hunger, through breath you have to fight for. You taught Tom how to mend a shoe. Badly. His stitches wandered like a drunk man at dusk. But he tried. That's the difference now. People try things. Things that don't guarantee survival. That's how you know you're no longer just alive. You're living. Trying, failing, trying again, without the frost waiting to punish you for wasting effort. You let Tom keep the shoe. He wears it proudly. One boot neat, one crooked. Says it's a symbol of what? He hasn't decided. There's a new girl in the chapel now. Small, fast-talking, wrapped in so many layers she looks like a bale of hay with feet. Her laughter's too loud. Her eyes too watchful. You see yourself in her. Not the shape of her suffering, but the speed of it. The way she moves like she's always 5 minutes from collapse. You gave her a stone, warmed in the fire, wrapped in cloth. Didn't say why. She nodded like she understood anyway. Mira's spoon plant finally bloomed. One crooked white flower shivering in the breeze like it doesn't trust the sun. You sat with it for an hour, just watching. No one said a word. Even Ember kept still. Mira eventually muttered, "Tough little bastard." You said, "That's how I describe you too." She didn't smile, but she didn't deny it. Later, she stitched a flower into the corner of your blanket. You ran your fingers over it like Braille. That's how you read love now in texture. You've stopped counting nights since the last frost. Not because they don't matter, but because they don't control you. You sleep when you're tired, not when you're terrified. You wake when your body's done resting, not because your bones are afraid of forgetting how. The dark is just dark now. Not a warning, just a curtain the world closes gently. You still light your candle, but you no longer watch it like it's your last one. Someone painted the side of the smithy red. Just a streak, thick and sudden. No signature, no purpose, just color. It's the first bright thing you've seen in weeks that wasn't meant to sell something. You stood in front of it for a while, head tilted, letting it speak whatever it wanted. Tom asked what it was. You said, "Proof." He said, "Of what?" You said, "That someone's alive enough to leave a mark." Mira sang today, not well, off key, and a bit too low, but she did it. Hummed first, then added words, something about fire and beans and someone named Darla. You didn't ask, you just joined in, quietly. The song made no sense, but you repeated the parts that felt like warmth. Ember sneezed. Tom tried to harmonize and failed completely. You sang anyway, loud enough to feel it in your chest. That's all singing ever needs to be. And as the evening creeps in soft and smoke-scented, and the stars blink like old friends finding their places again, you stretch your legs beside the fire, hands behind your head, and whisper not to the sky, not to the others, but to yourself. I am no longer surviving the cold. I am writing what comes after. And it feels, for the first time in a very long time, like that might be enough. You didn't think you'd ever carry a key again. It's a small one, bent slightly at the tip, wrapped in old string and tied to your belt like it might run off. The shed it opens isn't much, leaning, creaky, always smelling faintly of vinegar, but it's yours. Not owned, not claimed, but offered. You sweep it twice a week, keep the kindling dry, fix the latch when it groans in the wind. You sleep there sometimes, and each time you turn the key you whisper, "Still here." It's not a house, but it's a beginning. Mira's voice has changed. Stronger somehow, not louder. She still mumbles like her words are shy, but they don't crack anymore. She told a story the other night, something about her brother and a wheel of stolen cheese. Everyone laughed. Even you. It wasn't the story, it was the telling. The rhythm, the cadence, the comfort of being allowed to speak without worry. The frost would snuff the sound out. That's what heat does. It gives people their voices back, one syllable at a time. Tom built a fire without help. A real one. It smoked like it was ashamed of being new. But it caught. You watched from a distance, didn't say a word. He sat beside it like it had been waiting just for him. Later he told you he'd named it. You asked what? He shrugged. First, you understood. Everyone remembers their first fire, not the flames, the breath that came after, when you realized you might make it one more night. That breath is the real beginning. A stranger passed through, dressed in furs that said he'd never missed a meal. He tossed coin at the chapel steps, called it generosity. No one picked it up. The frost folk don't bow for metal anymore. They bow for blankets, for boots, for firewood, and names spoken gently. You watched the coins lie there until a child took them and gave them to Mira. She melted them into a pendant, gave it to you, said, "You were the first warmth I met." You didn't wear it, just kept it in your palm a while. That was enough. The goose Ember chased came back, walked straight into your camp like it had questions. Mira tossed it bread. It stared at you like it remembered. Ember barked once, then lay down, tail thumping. You sat there, sharing crumbs with a bird and a dog, wondering how you got here, fed, surrounded, known. You didn't ask for it, but you stayed. You always stay now. That's new. There's a new rule in the market. No shouting before sunrise. Mira says it's because people learned that quiet makes warmth last longer. That voices rise too fast when the air's still waking up. You like the hush, like the way people nod instead of speak. How fire gets made in silence. How kindness walks softer when frost still hides in the grass. The rule isn't enforced. It doesn't have to be. That's how you know it's real. You found a pair of gloves under the chapel bench. Stitched leather, good quality, almost new. You waited 3 days. No one claimed them. On the 4th you slipped them on. They fit like they were made for hands that had known cold. You kept them, didn't ask why, didn't need a story. Not everything warm comes with explanation. Sometimes the world just gives. And if you've survived long enough, you learn how to accept. The spoon flower died. Mira buried it near the forge, said it had lived long enough. You stood with her, head bowed like it was a person. Tom asked if she'd plant another. She said no. Some things are meant to bloom just once. You wrote that down, carved it into a bit of wood, gave it to the chapel. They hung it on the door. Now everyone who enters walks beneath a truth that came from a flower that grew out of a spoon. You've stopped flinching when people touch you. Tom hooks his elbow around yours when you walk to the well. Mira leans against your shoulder when she's tired. Ember sleeps on your feet. At first it felt like a trap, like every gesture might be the start of another loss. Now, it feels like something stronger than survival. Not softness. Safety. You're not just outlasting the frost, you're replacing it. The smithy's apprentice started drawing symbols on the walls, charcoal sketches of fire, stars, hands. One of them looked like you. Long coat, crooked smile, dog at your side. You didn't ask if it was meant to be, just stood there, hand on the stone, letting the moment draw itself into your chest. It's not about being seen, it's about being recognized. Even in smudges and soot it counts. Mira found an old song, hummed it for days before remembering the words. You helped her finish it, added your own line. We are the fire that winter forgot. She laughed, said, "That's not how it went." You shrugged. It is now. The next day, Tom sang it under his breath, while lighting a match. You didn't stop him. You just smiled, low and tired and whole. And as the night leans gentle across the village and the sky sighs stars into its corners, You sit beneath a roof you helped hold up, holding warmth that was never stolen, never begged, just shared, and you whisper into the quiet, I am no longer afraid of winter. Let it come. I've made something that outlasts it. Rain came today. Not a storm, not a downpour, just a steady tapping, like the sky knocking politely to be let in. The old kind of rain used to chill you to the spine, soaked your rags and turned your teeth into strangers. But this one just settled on the earth, like a song humming itself. You watched droplets form on the edge of Mira's patched roof and smiled when they didn't come through. That's how you measure progress now. Not by what changes, but by what no longer breaks you. Tom ran out into the mud with his arms wide, slipped 3 times, ruined his boots, came back covered in triumph and worms. That was great, he shouted, beaming. You shook your head. Mira handed him a rag like it was a crown. And in that moment, watching a boy dance with rain that once would have ended him, you thought, this is what winning looks like. Not banners, not feasts, just a soggy child who's not afraid of the sky anymore. Someone started leaving bits of poetry on the firewood stacks. Just a line or two, scrawled in charcoal or etched with a knife. Some were beautiful, some were nonsense. One read, smoke is just heat stretching its legs. Another, we warmed each other long before fire. You added one tucked behind a bundle near the chapel. I don't remember being born, but I remember not dying. No one mentioned it, but 2 days later someone added a second line underneath. That's close enough. The merchant who once chased you off his stoop now nods at you when you pass, offers a plum, if his day's been good. Doesn't say sorry, doesn't need to. The nod is enough. That tiny arc of the head says, I see what the frost didn't kill. You take the plum, bite into it slow, savoring the sweet, letting the juice run down your wrist without shame. Hunger taught you to eat like a thief. Warmth is teaching you how to eat like you belong. Mira braided your hair again, this time without asking. Just walked up with twine and fingers that didn't hesitate. You let her, even leaned down a bit to help. You used to flinch when anyone reached for your head. Now the feeling of her hands is familiar. Like boots that finally stopped blistering. She tied it off with a little twist of cloth that looked like it had once been part of her old scarf. You didn't ask. You just wore it. You met a boy named Leo who speaks in rhymes, not because he's clever, but because that's how he remembers things. His mother said he nearly froze last winter, and ever since his mind holds better when the words bounce. You asked him how he makes it through the nights. He said, if the wind can sing, then so can I. You nodded. Didn't tell him that's poetry. Didn't tell him that's survival in verse. Just promised to listen when he needs to rhyme. The fire pit behind the forge has become a gathering place. Not planned, it just happened. Someone always brings wood. Someone else brings broth. People sit. Some talk, some don't. You sat there last night, ember at your feet, Mira beside you, Tom trying to toast a bean. The warmth wasn't just heat, it was habit. That's what people forget. Survival isn't a single act. It's repeated quiet persistence, built one coal at a time. You heard laughter you didn't recognize. Sharp, high-pitched, untrained, new. A woman had just arrived, new to the road, new to the cold, already coughing. She laughed like someone who didn't know what to be afraid of yet, and you felt something strange. Not pity, not worry, hope, because that sound meant she wasn't done. She hadn't given up her music yet. You passed her a flask of broth, said nothing, let her keep laughing while it still belonged to her. The chapel walls are covered in chalk now. Lines, names, dates, symbols. The priest stopped cleaning them off, said they might be messages to someone higher. You knew better. They were messages to each other. You wrote one yesterday. I lived in the cold, but I dream here. Mira added a sun above it. Tom turned it into a face. Someone else circled it. That's how legacy works now. In scribbles, in layers, in warmth made visible. Someone gifted you a tin cup. Nothing fancy, just clean and whole. You didn't know what to do with it at first. You'd spent so long drinking from cracked clay and cupped hands that something new felt wrong. But that night, when Mira ladled stew, she poured yours into the tin, looked you in the eye and said, "That's yours. Use it like you plan on coming back tomorrow." You held it with both hands. That was the closest thing to a vow you've ever made. Tom asked if you believed in angels. You said no, then paused. Then said, "Maybe, if they walk on tired legs and light fires without asking." He liked that. Drew a picture of you with wings made of smoke. You laughed, told him he drew your nose wrong. He said, "I drew it from memory." You didn't correct him again. Let him believe your wings were real. Maybe they are, made from everything the frost failed to take. And as the rain slows to a whisper and the fire sinks low into its coals and Mira starts another line of that half-song she keeps promising to finish, you lean back, watch Tom draw in the dirt with a stick, and whisper to yourself, "This is how you bury winter." Not with shovels, but with songs, spoons, and shared stew. And for the first time since the cold first touched your bones, you believe you're building something that can't be frozen. Someone built a bench near the granary, just wide enough for 2 people, and a dog who refuses to sit straight. No one said who made it, but one morning it was there. Rough-hewn, slanted, and solid. The kind of bench that says, "Stay a while." So you did. Sat beside Mira and let embers sprawl across your feet, like he'd earned the right to be furniture. Tom brought roasted chestnuts in a pouch that smelled like smoke and old leather. You ate slowly, passing one to Mira, one to Tom, and one to Ember. Though he spat his out like betrayal, the bench stayed warm long after you stood. That's how you knew it mattered. Mira stitched a flag. Not for a kingdom. Not for a lord. For the fire pit. Just a scrap of linen dyed with ash and beetroot, stitched with a symbol you still don't understand. She said it's for the frost folk, for anyone who's ever slept with their back to a door and a hand on their chest, just to feel something. It flaps in the breeze now, just above the fire, and no one questions it. They sit under it like it's protection, like it means home in the loosest, most honest sense of the word. A girl offered you a stone, smooth, dark, warm from her pocket. "For your stories," she said. "To keep them from floating away." You smiled. Let her place it in your palm like a priest giving a blessing. You keep it near the fire now, under your blanket, beside the tin cup, and the drawing of wings Tom swears looks exactly like you. You never asked her name. She didn't ask yours. That's how warmth moves now. Hand to hand, soul to soul, name optional. You passed by your old shelter behind the baker's. It's gone now, cleared out, boarded up, erased. You stood there for a moment, boots in the mud, remembering what it felt like to press your ribs to that stone wall and pretend the oven's heat might leak far enough to reach your bones. It never really did, but you survived there. That means something. You traced your initials in the dirt. Nothing grand, just proof. You were here. You endured, and you kept walking. The forge apprentice made you a pin, said it was scrap metal, bent into a crooked flame. Ugly little thing. You wear it on your coat now, not because it's pretty, but because it's true. It catches the light just enough to be seen, not flashy, just present. Someone asked what it meant. You said it's what the cold couldn't kill. They didn't ask again. They just nodded, like that explained everything. And honestly, it did. You taught Leo how to make a stew that didn't taste like disappointment. Potatoes, turnip, a whisper of time. He added too much salt. You told him it tasted like the ocean was trying to apologize. He laughed, mouth full. That's a good sound. You're collecting those now, sounds that don't come with fear behind them. Laughter, spoons against bowls, snoring near fires, Rain on canvas. They don't chase away the frost. They outlast it. Someone carved a window into Mira's new wall. Just a square hole, no glass, no frame. For light, she said, and for looking out. You added a bit of cloth that can be tied shut when the wind's high. Tom stuck a flower pot on the ledge. Ember sleeps under it now like a guard dog with seasonal allergies. The window doesn't do much, but it changes everything. There's a world outside again, and now it's welcome. A boy tripped carrying firewood and swore like a blacksmith. Mira barked a laugh so loud you nearly choked on your tea. The boy stood, red-faced, wood scattered, and shouted, "It's not funny," but it was. It was deeply funny, because a year ago that same fall would have been deadly. Now it was just annoying. That's how far you've come. From fatal to foolish. From crisis to comedy. You helped him pick up the wood, still chuckling. He muttered, "You people are weird." You said, "We earned it." You found a feather in your boot this morning. Not sure how it got there. Not sure what kind of bird. But you kept it, stuck it into the seam of your cap like a knight might wear a plume. Mira rolled her eyes. Tom said it made you look like royalty. You bowed, overly dramatic, and said, "Lord of the long cold." They groaned. You smiled. Jokes are a luxury you don't waste anymore, even the bad ones. There's a tree by the edge of town that flowers early. Too early, really. Everyone says it'll regret it when the frost returns. You understand that tree, always blooming before it's safe, always risking color in a world that remembers white. You sat beneath it today, back against the bark, hand on the old tin cup, feather tucked behind your ear. You didn't speak, just breathed. That's a different kind of bloom, too. Someone left a loaf by your fire. No note. Still warm. You sliced it into quarters, handed it out without question. That's the rule now. If you didn't bake it, you share it. If you did bake it, you still share it. Bread is just warmth shaped into something you can chew. You don't eat to fill your belly anymore. You eat to stay human. That's what the cold tried to take first. And as dusk unfurls itself like a worn blanket and the stars blink into place one by one, you sit with your feet in dry boots, your hands full of nothing but enough. And you say the words not like a spell, but like a homecoming. We made it through, and we are making something better. And this time, it's not the fire that keeps you warm. It's the people around it. It's easy to forget how dangerous silence used to be, the kind that wrapped around your neck like snow-soaked cloth. Back then, silence meant the fire had died, that no one was coming, that the wind had won. But now, silence means something else. It means full bellies. It means hands resting instead of clenching. It means the story doesn't have to be told tonight, because you'll all be here tomorrow. You sit in it gladly. Let it stretch out like a cat across your shoulders. You and Mira built a second bench, this one with a back. Tom helped, even though his hammering sounds like war. It creaks when you sit on it, but that's the sound of something existing. It faces the fire pit, just off to the side. A place for people to watch without joining. Not everyone's ready for the middle. That's all right. The edge is where survival begins. You used to live there. Now you make room for those who still do. Someone hung a bell from the chapel's lintel. No rope, no sign. Just a bell. Mira rang it once when the stew boiled over. Tom rang it when he finished carving his name into the table leg. You rang it when the first frost returned. Not cruel, not sudden, just present. A quiet reminder, not a threat. Like the frost saying, "I'm still here." So you rang the bell and whispered back, "So are we?" Ember's gotten slower. Doesn't chase shadows like he used to. Sleeps more. Licks his joints before curling up. You keep a blanket for him now, folded near the bench. He doesn't thank you. Just settles in like you owe him something. Maybe you do. Dogs remember things we bury. You stroke his head each night and say, "We did it, old friend." He huffs like he already knows. Maybe he always did. A woman came with questions. Wanted to know how the frost folk made it, what the trick was, what the secret is. You told her there isn't one. Just rocks and fire and hands that didn't let go. Just people who stopped waiting to be saved. She didn't seem satisfied. People rarely are when the answer is each other. She left with her pen and her theories. You stayed with the people who never asked for proof. The second wall of Mira's shelter got painted. Yellow. A horrible, eye-watering yellow. Tom's idea. Mira hated it until she saw how it glowed at dusk. Like sunlight refusing to leave, she said. Now she calls it the smile wall. Everyone leaves little notes there. Not big ones. Just scraps, jokes, names, warnings, hope. The frost reads them too. But it doesn't erase them. Not anymore. You carved a walking stick for the girl with the fast mouth and bad boots. Took you 3 nights. She cried when you gave it to her. Said it was the first thing anyone made for her. You said, no, it's the first thing someone made because of you. She didn't understand the difference yet. But she will. When someone gives her warmth in a form she didn't expect. That's how we pass it on. Someone asked what the hardest night was. You didn't answer right away. Not because you didn't know, because you did. You saw it in full, fingers cracked, lips blue, Ember's breath shallow, Mira silent, Tom dreaming of heat that didn't exist. You almost didn't make it, but instead of answering, you lit a candle and handed it to the boy who asked. Keep it going, you said. That's all I remember, he nodded. That was enough. You saw your own shadow today, cast long across the market, stretched tall by firelight. You used to avoid looking, didn't like how small you'd become. Now you watch it move like a companion, a record of your presence. The frost doesn't erase shadows. It stretches them, teaches them how to grow longer. You stand in yours now, not afraid of what it holds, just thankful it's still following. Tom asked if this is what it means to be grown, to survive. You said no. This is what it means to begin. He didn't get it yet. He will. Survival isn't the end of anything. It's the ground floor of something else, something wider, warmer, less about breath and more about what you do with it. You tell him. The cold teaches you not to die. Warmth teaches you how to live. He nods like it's a riddle. That's fine. Let him solve it in his own time. You wrote something last night. Not for trade. Not for memory, just for the fire. Folded it, burned it, watched the words rise with the smoke. Mira asked what it said. You answered, thank you. She didn't ask who it was for. That's the best kind of friendship, the kind that lets a prayer burn in peace. And as the final embers stretch thin, and the wind nudges the cloth at the shelter's edge, and the world quiets into something that feels gentle, you lie down between people who know your name and still love you anyway. And you think simply, clearly, we didn't just survive the cold. We built something that will survive us. And that is the warmest thing of all.